This week's podcast is dedicated to our mate Bob Rathmill.
Good evening. Good to see you, Livo.
Yeah,
very
likewise,
fine,
man.
thank you. Yeah.
I was thinking about this, and I think that my earliest recollection of you and me, at least knowing each other, was, do you remember that Cavalier GXL or something you had, that silver one?
I bought it off Wayne Stillings. I always remember the lad who bought it off. Yeah.
And you were on your way to DJ at either Crystals or the Raven in St Helens.
Oh my, Crystals.
It was Crystals.
Because I don't think I ever DJ'd in the Raven.
No,
so
you used to shove
Crystals.
me in the Raven.
Yeah, did I? Oh, right. That was the one on the roundabout, wasn't it, when you first went in? Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But you broke down one night in the Cavalier, and I come and got you in my Mini.
Did you?
Yeah. And I remember where it was. It was on Peasley Cross Road.
Did it break down or did it run out of petrol? Or
Something like that.
I mean, I still don't know. I mean, I know where the petrol goes. I sometimes get that wrong, the kind of petrol that goes into them. But I always remember I bought that car off a guy called Wayne Stillings, who is the most perfect person, you know, in the way that he I shouldn't say OCD because that's a problem people have, but you know, you would describe him as someone with a slight OCD even when we were kids, really, you know. And the car was absolutely perfect when I bought stuff from him, and he used to look at the mess that I was just after weeks of having it, and I think it used to break his heart really about the way that car went, really, you know.
I think that part of the problem was that at the time you were establishing a lot of different ventures, weren't you? And you did a lot of living in the car, probably.
Yeah, I think that was the first decent car I had. I remember, I mean, despite the fact it broke down. But I do remember being very proud of having that car. And I think probably part of it, probably the justification in my head was I was driving a lot to a lot of shows. I mean, I think at that time, one of the things that I was doing was running various DJing nights, alternative nights, I guess, for want of a better thing, in various places around the Northwest, really. You know, St Helens, Widnes, Liverpool, Preston, I think we were doing stuff in as well, and various other places, really. So I needed a car that could get me there. I needed good wheels, basically, like, you know.
Apart from when it conked out.
Exactly, when they conked out, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, they were heady days indeed. And I know at the time I remember you on about all the plans and what you were doing and stuff. And I think I'm correct in saying this was probably just after 35 Summers had folded, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think that I've always remembered that was quite a good business strategy with the T-shirts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I still like to think I have about 1,000 ideas a week, really, and if hopefully one or two of them are fairly good. That was a good one.
Yeah.
And I guess it was that moment, that zeitgeist, that moment in time, really. At the time, just before that, when we did the Shankly shirts, I was still managing the farm. So I was managing the farm at that time.
Right.
And Carl Hunter, who was the bass player in the farm, when I told him the name of the band, 35 Summers, he came up with this really obtuse idea, which was wonderful. It was a wonderful piece of art, but it was too fucking clever, really.
Right.
It was a very, very close-up of the fish from Rumblefish, because that's where the name 35 Summers comes from. It's a Tom Waits line in that film.
Right.
And I thought, this is too clever, and we didn't sell any. And at the time, bands like in Spiral Carpets were doing the Moo t-shirts.
Yeah.
James were doing the Come Home thing, you know.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, you know, it was about capturing that moment. And there was a lot of what you call scally rock. The Farm were one of those bands. The Mondays were bands like that. So it was the first time where lads, generally lads, could wear trainers and jeans and kind of leisure clobber, for want of a better thing, and still be in a rock and roll band, really. Look like Plumbers, but be in a band, really, you know. Yeah. And so it was that connection between football and music. So I thought, well, the ideal one for us, or the ideal one would be to do a Bill Shankly one. So I remember always finding that programme, blowing it up, and it blew up beautifully because it just pixelated beautifully that picture of Shankly when you blew it up. And then I always remember in my mum's house just getting a kind of letter, you know, the kind of things that used to black out on a letter set where if you got it wrong on a typewriter, and I just put 35 on his arm and Summers where the Umbro badge was, and I think we made 50, and they flew out, you know. And do you know what? I still sell them to this day. I think,
really?
Yeah, still sell them to this day.
Fucking great.
And it's just gone on and on and on, and people still talk to me about that T-shirt. Really, never about the music of 35 Summers, but always about some people do, but of the T-shirt, Bill Shankly T-shirt, people remember it. You know, I think the break still wear it. You know,
I think this is me remembering something you told me 20 odd years ago, so I'm probably wrong, but I think the break come when you sent one to Peel, wasn't it?
That's true. Yeah, I sent a cassette tape, as everyone did then, sorry, not a cassette tape, I think CDs even then, yeah. We had about a CD burned. And a T-shirt, a Bill Shankly T-shirt, you know, and he wrote back to me. I've still got his postcards, because me and John then had a kind of, not affair, you know, but you know, regularly he would write postcards. Right. That was John's thing, really, you know. And it led to our first John Peel session, and in the end, we did 4 John Peel sessions in the end, you know, yeah.
Well, I think that's why it's an important story.
Yeah,
because if you're in a band, it just shows you there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Absolutely. And he used to write to me because he used to batter them. He'd wear them all the time. It was always great seeing him on, you know, pictures of, because the BBC didn't cover Glastonbury then, but you would see pictures of him in the news or whatever, you know, and there he was in his Bill Shankly T-shirt, proudly wearing it everywhere he went, really, you know, and he'd say, Dave, I need another one, you know, from that, and, oh, Dave, one of my mates wants one, or Dave, can I get one? Brilliant. You know, yeah, so it was really good, yeah.
I think that's sort of always stood you in good stead, hasn't it? You've had a good idea with marketing all along the line.
I think so. I think I was kind of, I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved being in bands and a musician and all that kind of it, you know, and that part of my life is a look back at it and think, you know, immensely proud of everything, you know, and kind of, and loved, more importantly, loved every single moment of it. But I think I found my skill set really when I went to the business side of it all. Really, once I decided that was for me, really, that was when things really started to happen, I think, in music.
And when was you transition into that from musician?
When we got dropped, really, I think, you know, I mean, nobody really knew who managers were or what managers did when we were kids. So I always naturally gravitated towards that thing of being the manager of the band or the spokesperson for the bands I was in. So in that sense, I guess, from a young age, I was taking that role of the business side of it, even though I would never have thought that's what I was doing, but I kind of was, I suppose. So when it come to meetings with record labels or whatever else, I always went, even if we had a manager, I'd always go with the manager. Yeah. I think, but I never made any money out of it, you know, of course. And then I think when I first started doing it was when Peter Hooton from The Farm asked me to manage them. And so that was my first kind of proper venture into it. And then working at Produce Records with The Farm, because then Kev Sampson and Suggs started managing The Farm, and I took over the label management, running the label. And so then that time of, you know, the first Farm album and the singles we did there, that was my first foray into really understanding of the way marketing worked, how distribution worked, how records really worked properly, with proper budgets and videos and everything else. So really beginning to understand the intricacies of it that way. And then, of course, I got signed then with RCA, and so left it again for a little bit. And then only when we got dropped from RCA did I then, hence the setup and the DJing thing and all that side of it, and going into artist management and back into into records and all that kind of stuff. So I was still finding my feet, and I always to this day say I am, and I truly am, a jack of all trades, master of none. Really, you know. I think my skill, if there is such a thing, you know, is I'm good at exciting people about stuff. And I'm good at connecting people, really. You know, I've always been good at surrounding myself with the right lieutenants, really. And I think, and I think, you know, I think that's an important thing of anything, really. And also knowing my limitations, really, about stuff, really. So, you know, a good sense of self-awareness, I think, will get you a long way, really. Well,
that's because you were brought up in Widnes, isn't it?
Yes. Well, and I think a good grounding was my mum. My mum was a cabaret singer all her life, you know, and so me and Lawrence, my brother, we spent our lives going to Butlins and Pontins camps because my mum was a cabaret singer and all of that. So, you know, we always had a sense of being in that side of it, but not really in the true rock and roll side of it, more in the variety entertainment side of it, really. And I think, you know, I you know, when you watch things like the Peter Kay stuff, and he taught. I know these people say that touches everyone's lives, but it really did. In terms of the kind of the youth and the upbringing me and my brother had was very similar to a lot of those kind of pastiches that happen in those programs.
That's probably why you're jack of all trades. It's the variety.
It is. That's right. Sorry, that's what the point I was trying to make. Really, yeah, exactly that. Yeah, because you had to be really in that side of it. Really, yeah.
So you then go into. So this is sort of like around the time of I suppose teaching as well, wasn't it, at Halton College with the rock and pop thing?
Well, that was when I got dropped. So when we got dropped from RCA, I really didn't know, because for the first time ever, I wasn't really in a band, although I did go in a band for a brief moment in time after that. So it was a bit like a fly dying, really. It was like, we'll give it another go with Ian Finney and
right.
And we did another John Peel session with that band as well. But when we got dropped from RCA, I really didn't know what I was going to do, really. So I actually... Bob, and Roger, Roger Appleton, who I know you've had on the show here, and Bob, they taught me when I'd been slightly younger. And so I literally just went in to see them in Halton College and said, been dropped from RCA, blah, blah, blah. And Bob went, you did the farm, you did with produce. Why don't you tell kids how to run a record label? I said, can you do that? And he goes, well, no, but why not? There's this module called Media Studies or whatever it was in a BTEC, and I'll help you. And Bob helped me write this module because I knew nothing about education beyond having been a student for some years myself and doing my own degree, but not that side of the fence. And so he helped me write this program, and we did a year's thing of teaching young people how to run a record label, and we released a record with a band called The Nice Party with Dave Upton and them. And then what happened was then I went to work in that summer. Then I just thought, that's it. And I went to do, I think it was Camp America. I think it was then. I am struggling to remember the years, but I think that was the time. And anyway, I went to Camp America and I worked for the summer, working with kids, in America. Again, just beginning to understand what I was going to try and do. And whilst I was there, when I came back, my mum said the Halton College had been phoning. I thought, they must want me to do that module again next year. When I came back, there was a new head of performing arts at Halton College, a guy called John Weir, and he came back and he went, Dave Fenlon, or Pichilingi it was then, this module that you did, we've had all these kids applying for a course to do this. Right. He goes, why don't we do a rock and pop diploma? And I went, fucking hell, what does that mean? So he said, don't worry, a bit like Bob, but on a grander scale. He goes, we'll just write one. So he just took a BTEC performing arts in theatre studies, and everywhere it said theatre or acted or whatever, he just changed it to the word music and performing. Literally wrote that. There was only one other in Scotland at the time that Bell and Sebastian actually had come through.
Right.
And so we set up what was the first one in England, rock and pop diploma in Widnes. And we had 100 kids applied to come onto this course, of which I think after the first week, there was about 30 left because the fallout rate, because once they found out they had to come to college and actually do some stuff, it wasn't 30, but I think it dropped by about 70, 60
I've
people.
spoke to lads who were on it at the time, and because I'd already been to college when you started.
That's right,
I'd been on Bob's and Roger and stuff, and they were like, we were just, we'd get thrown out the lecture theatre because we were skinning up and that. It's like, and it's like, you think about it, if they grabbed that opportunity, it's just so fucking obvious, isn't it? That if they'd actually done the course, they wouldn't be fucking whinging.
No, true,
because you wouldn't let them smoke a joint at 10 in the morning.
I mean, I don't think I was the one necessarily. I think there was always...
No, it wasn't you.
But there was... It was such a kind of... Because everybody was coming to us at that time and going, where are these... it was at the time... Because at the time it happened, the moment in time of it, because if you remember, the whole acid house thing and everything else had died down and grunge happened.
Yeah.
And so everybody was into things like Nirvana, Pearl Jam and all those type of acts, really. So all these lads, predominantly lads, were in kind of, clobber that kind of idolised those acts, really. Yeah. And I always remember my wife now, Rebecca, that's where we met. Well, she'd been a dancer, actually, with supporting one of the bands that had played with The Farm some years later, so I had met her earlier. But she was brought in by John Weir, who was the head of this performance, because he said in his divine wisdom, he said, these kids should learn to dance as well. So if you've ever seen fucking some of the clientele I've just told you doing their first dance lessons.
I remember one day, those double doors flying open. I don't know why I was around the college, but those double doors of the fucking, I don't know, was it a hall or a lecture?
It was the hall in the hall. Yeah.
And a lad, I'm not going to name him, storming out of there, and he's like, "Hey, now she wants me to fucking dance. What the fuck? What the fuck does she think? What? I'm not here to fucking dance." And it was like, wow.
She hadn't danced to take that at the time. It was hilarious because they'd all been told to bring, dance tap shoes, whatever, not tap shoes, but shoes that you can dance and all that. So they all turned up in their airwear and they're all just looking at it. I mean, if you could have filmed that at that time, it would have been fucking priceless.
Fucking great. I just remember that moment.
So when I talk about that retention rate, I think after that first dance lesson, we lost about another 20, I think.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So it was, but it was a great time, and that course, it became quite infamous in its own way. I did it for 2 years. It built up, and they sent me to New York doing stuff. The guy who, I think he was a thief in the end, the guy who's the head of Halton College in the end.
Yeah,
but he brought me into the office going, "You're making this is great, fantastic. This is what the college, should be all about," because the reports that we get about it. And I said, I thought, well, I'm getting my weak moments. All my mates used to be going to the new music seminar in New York. I said, well, I really should be going to this industry thing, in New York. And because at the time I was still trying to do all my other stuff outside of there and everything else. So he sent me to there. It wasn't a problem really. But then I left there to carry on education because I then went to Lipper, to McCartney School, working with Phil Sachs, who had worked with the Happy Mondays, because he'd managed the Mondays and I'd managed the farm, and we'd become mates then. He'd found out I was doing some teaching. He said, because Phil always taught with a lisp. He said, "I'm teaching in that Paul McCartney school in Liverpool," because he was still in Manchester. And I said, "Oh God, can you get me in?" And he goes, "I'll try." Anyway, he got me an interview, and I ended up going to there then. And I taught for there for some years as well.
I think that's a good example, though, of not concentrating too much on a closed door. When you were dropped by RCA and that is where the story could have ended. And with a lot of people, it does.
Yeah.
It's just like, we had a day and so I think it's important to emphasise, especially with this kind of business, because it's sort of ego driven and people very, very easily get demoralised and drop either dreams or ambition at the slightest setback. So I think that's an important story in terms of it wasn't the end. Then this.
That's right. It felt like it at the time, but I think you've got to just. I mean, I can only talk for myself, but you dusted yourself down, and all I knew was, I think once I'd done an assessment of everything, I just thought, I just want to stay in music. I just want to stay in, because I'd had a taste of it properly. I had a taste for it then, and so I thought, I'm good at this in some ways, and I just want to stay in it. I'm not quite sure what I'll do.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the education side was a very happy accident. My life's been full of happy accidents, really. There's never been any. There's been plans, but none of them have really happened. Yeah. There's been this led to that. I think, what was it? Someone once said, life only makes sense when you're looking backwards. Really, it never really makes sense. Totally. If you said that was going to happen, it doesn't really make sense, really.
No, but I think it's important to aim for something, no matter how nebulous, because even if you don't get there,
absolutely.
And so if you're sort of always pushing forward, do end up going in some direction.
You do.
I'm just wondering, when you went to the new music seminar in New York, if there's the sort of germ of Sound City may have been planted there, or did that come to you later on?
It came later on. Although, funny enough, one of the people that had a big impact on my life, who I worked with for a long time, was one of the first times I met him properly then, was Tony Wilson.
Right.
And so Tony was there, and funny enough, Tony used to go to the new music seminar pretty much. He'd been going for a number of years. I'd only gone. That was the first year I went, when Halton College sent me, or they paid for me to go. And I was out there with a number of people, James Barton, who set up Cream, and Andy Carroll, one of the DJs from there, and a number of us. And so we were making up with a lot of the people from the Hacienda then. And because Phil Sachs was out there as well at that time, obviously I met up with Tony. I'd met him before, but not properly. But New Music Seminar was where we all hung out together in quite a serious way. And then after that was when I then started working with Tony in the city. So Tony's inspiration to set up in the city was the New Music Seminar.
Right.
So it was quite ironic we talked about that. So he set up in the city, which was meant to be the British version of the New Music Seminar, which was a showcase festival to discover artists as well as a music business conference. And I worked with Tony for 14 years on that. And it was only when Tony died that I decided I couldn't work on it anymore because it was with his partner, Yvette. I decided I didn't want to carry on working with it. And so I set up Sound City after that when Tony died.
Yeah, because that's been phenomenally successful, hasn't it?
It's grown and grown. It was, like I said, the idea of it came from me working on In the City for a number of years. And I decided to move it from the other end of the M62, bring it from Manchester back into Liverpool. And also to change it slightly. So everything we'd done on In the City. So In the City had been hugely successful for a number of years. But its premise was very simple. It was based on 54 of what we consider to be the best unsigned bands in the UK. And a very strong music business conference that Tony would interview his mates, basically.
Yeah.
And we discovered some great bands through it. Coldplay came through it, Radiohead came through it, Muse came through it. A number of bands came through, many more really, but they were some of the bigger bands that came through that. Oasis was another one. And but then what happened was technology came and disrupted the business model for it, really. So things like MySpace disrupted the business model for In the City. So as well as Tony dying, technology disrupted the model. Right. And so we'd all been going at that time to the new kid on the block at the time was a festival called South by Southwest. Right. And so I'd been going to South by Southwest for a few years, and I thought, this is what we should be doing now. This is the new model. And so when I set up Sound City, I decided to almost base the model of Sound City on South by Southwest. And so that was the model, that was the inspiration for it. And it's grown over the last, 11 years now to probably the biggest event of its kind in Europe in terms of a metropolitan festival. And more importantly for the business side of it and all the other initiatives that we've set up around it, working with young people and everything else has grown from that, which I am immensely proud of that side of it, really. It's been a great journey. So
its origins in terms of funding and stuff like that, was that something that was like sort of completely private enterprise, or did you get in, funding bodies and the council and stuff like that?
Same as we did it within the city. One thing Tony taught me was how to go out and grab that money, really. So In the City was probably 20% ticket sales, 70% public money, and 10% sponsorship. It was at a time when you could get public money, because Tony would just go to the Manchester City Council and he'd go, I need fucking $100,000 to do this festival, so they'd give it him. And then he'd go to what was then the Northwest Development Agency and go, they've given me $100,000, you need to match it. So they'd give him another $100,000. And then it didn't matter then, because Tony, it didn't cost us that much to put it on. So he'd already made his dough. So it didn't matter if he didn't sell a ticket. Sound City was different in the sense, but what I did do, I decided that three-pronged approach, public money, commercial ticket sales and sponsorship, was the way to go with it. Our kind of percentages were different than that. So, a lot less on terms of the public money, particularly because of the year that it set it up. In 2008 was when the world went off a cliff. Yeah. So there wasn't that much public money, or there wasn't as much as Tony had in the past. But there still was some public money to be had. So that first 2 years was particularly important in terms of getting public money. But Kevin McManus, who's been a long-term friend and a long-term ally, Kevin had been a journalist at the NME for many, many years. And we've been friends for many years. But then he was in a position of running a company called Acme, which was they grabbed money from everywhere to support businesses. And so Kevin was he was almost the conduit, whereas all the people in suits didn't understand what any of us were talking about. He did, because he came from that world. And so Kevin was instrumental in getting us that first bit of funding to get the first one out the train station. And we were lucky in the sense the year that I set it up. And again, it was purely accidental. It was 2008, which was the year of the capital culture in Liverpool. So there was some money around then. Yeah. And so Kev came to me with an idea saying, can you do a load of gigs around, because McCartney is doing this gig at Anfield, and I want to put on a load of gigs that's more connected with the local community as opposed to McCartney. And I said, well, I'm not doing In the City anymore. Why don't we try and set up a new thing? I've been going to South by Southwest and all this, so I got him excited about that. Yeah. And he went, oh, fucking hell, great, yeah, let's do that. So we used it, and we created Sound City, the first one. And we did our first parties at South by Southwest that year. So we took bands like the Wombats, who didn't even have a deal at that time, and other bands. And it was a great success, really. So that first year really catapulted us, and then the second year was a little bit easier to get money, and we sold more tickets and all that kind of thing. So it just grown and grown and grown then. And then I sold part of the company to a company called Ingenious, which gave us even more money. And then 3 years ago, I bought Ingenious out, or I got my partners in China to buy them out. And so now I'm with the biggest entertainment company in China now,
right,
who bought out Ingenious. And so my life took another twist then to Asia and everything else, really, you know.
Right, so what happens over there?
Well, Sound City, like I said, it grew. And so I sold 30% of it to a company called Ingenious Media in 2012. James Barton introduced me, because James Barton had sold part of Cream to Ingenious.
Right.
And he said, you should meet these guys because they'll help you grow. They'll give you money. Because our problem with Sound City was, you know, to make it grow, you know, putting events on, all the money goes that way before it comes this way.
Yeah.
So I wanted to scale it up. But to scale it up, I needed a couple of million quid to do that, and I didn't have that to do it. So I needed someone to give me that money. So I went to Ingenious Media, told them what our plans were to do it, and they backed it. So they came in, they bought 30% of the company. And that allowed us to scale it up and grow with their money.
Right.
And then after being with them for 3 years, because they were what called VC, venture capitalists, they just, you know, all they want to do is make money. We all want to make money, but they wanted to do it in ways that I didn't necessarily want to do. But because then they'd made it a bigger success, I couldn't afford to buy them out.
Right.
And so I was looking for a new business partner to work with me, because I couldn't buy them out. And I've been friends with Seymour Stein for the last 30 years. Through Tony. I met Seymour through Tony.
He was the A&R guy, wasn't he?
Seymour set Sire Records up, and he discovered the Ramones, Talking Heads.
I was watching Roger's film, and he's in it, and you're in it the other day.
Ah, yeah, that's right, yeah,
so,
yeah.
So,
and
yeah.
Madonna, most famously, you know, he signed Madonna.
He was on about the Bunnymen.
And he signed the Bunnymen, the Smiths, Cure, all those bands. So Seymour has been a friend forever. And I said, you know, Seymour, I need someone to buy these people out. I can't afford to buy them out. And so he helped me introduce me to a few people that he knew, and one of whom was a guy called Shen Wei, who I didn't know anything about Shen Wei, but Shen is, he's a young kid, or he was a young kid, he's in his 40s now, from Beijing in China. He was hugely inspired by British music when he was growing up, what he could get hold of in the People's Republic of China. And he'd set up a record label called Modern Sky Entertainment, just to put his own records out.
Right. And
his mates' records. And what bit of money he had, he lost. So then he was influenced by things like The Enemy at that time and so on. This is in the mid-90s, early 90s. And so he decided to start a music magazine of Chinese bands and give the music away free with his magazine. And that magazine went on to sell 5 million copies a week at that time. And so that was his first foray into the music business in China, which, believe me, if we think it's hard here, it's another level over there. I can imagine. So his company's now been going for 20 years, and he's grown the company now so that now he's the largest independent entertainment company in China. He's the largest independent record label in China, over 150 artists signed to his record label. Wow. He's the largest festival promoter in China, and he owns a number of venues over there. He does about 7.5 million tickets a year, and he owns a platform that over here would be called Vivo, but in China it's M now, and it's got 42 million subscribers to the platform, and through the middle of that, it's got a ticketing platform which allows him to connect with his audience who wants to sell tickets. So here he is. He's grown this whole thing. Seymour had met him a number of times. Seymour said, you know, my friend Dave, and he said, because then he knew I'd worked with Rob Gretton from Factory, and knew I worked with Tony, and he was a big fan of New Order and bands like that, and Happy Mondays and so on. So he said, oh, I know about this guy, you know, I'd like to meet him. So he invited me to Helsinki to meet him 3.5 years ago. And I went to Helsinki, and I was with this guy who works for me in New York, a guy called Michael Livo. And like I said, I get very animated and quite excited about things. Yeah. So I spoke to him, and he'd already seen all my numbers for the business, and And I spoke to Livo for about an hour, and at the end of the hour, we went for some dinner, and then he just looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, gonna do it."
Wow.
And I went, "You're gonna do what?" And he goes, "I'm gonna do everything you just said, basically, you know."
Fuck.
And I said, you know, it was like that scene in Monty Python, expecting to haggle, you know, or whatever. And he goes, no negotiation. I know you've inflated the numbers slightly, but I don't care. Like you. And we're going to do it. He said, but I want you to run my company for Europe, for modern, because I want to grow modern sky outside of Europe, outside around the world. And I love British music the best. And I want to do it out of Britain, out of the UK. So the lawyers got in the way for about 4 months and everything else. But the deal we agreed in that 1 hour in Helsinki was the deal that went through. He bought out Ingenious. But then the deal was, as part of that, was that we started a new company together, Modern Sky UK, where we now start our own entertainment company in this part of the world. So now we're a record label and publishing company. We're working with, you know, we're through Warner's ADA globally. So I'm back with Warner's again, doing stuff with them. Everywhere except for China. We've signed 12 bands to our roster now, and we had our first top 20 album with Slow Readers Club just recently. We've just bought a share in Orange Amps.
Wow.
So we bought a share of them. We've done a few more deals that we're looking to buy equity stakes in a few other companies. And so I'm back now fully into the world of records and publishing, really.
Right.
And I'm loving every single moment of it, really. Now Becky Ayres, who's been the chief of operations for Sound City for a number of years, for the last 9 years, she's now the MD. So she's taken Sound City on. She's at the helm of that, and I'm at the helm of Modern Sky. So that's my role now, you know.
Wow,
and
cool.
all thanks to Seymour, really, you know. But so now I spend half of my life going to China and South Korea, as opposed to, I still go to America a lot, but less and less to America, more east now.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, doing business with people in that part of the world is just so refreshing. And it also feels like doing business in China feels like 1953, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. What I mean is rock and roll's about to happen,
right?
But you fucking know what's about to happen over there, really.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like you know what's going to happen, so it's even more exciting, really, because you can't get enough. We took the XX out there. A few months ago we took the Chemical Brothers out. We've taken the Prodigy out. We're taking more and more bands out there now, as well as all the bands that we're signing to our business here. We're looking to pipeline them into China as well. And because we control the means of distribution in China through MNOW and everything else, we can connect with that youth audience really well, really, you know. So it's just
sounds
very,
amazing.
very exciting.
Yeah,
it's hugely exciting. Yeah.
So I mean, what kind of advice would it be if you were sort of, if it was somebody now who's sort of in a position where they're thinking what to do next in terms of either starting a business, or if they've just had a big letdown going in their career and they want to, you know, reboot themselves. I mean, it sounds to me like a big component of all your successes has been, first of all, being enthusiastic enough about the idea to get people involved who need to be involved in order to make the idea happen. I suppose it comes down to, I mean, I should let you answer the question because you've got
it's all right,
tons of success. I'm just trying to sort of assimilate everything you've been saying. I suppose a big part of it with it is the self-belief and the...
I think so, and not taking no for an answer, but listening to people at the same time, really, that you trust. Listen to people that you trust. Ignore those people that are negative. I think you know, enthusiasm should be a given, you would think, but you know, too many people are not, you know, but enthusiasm alone won't get you there, but it will help. I also think, you know, going back to, I think one of the things my mum taught us when we were young, you know, I've got 2 kids, and I always say to my wife, really, I don't really care what education they get, as long as they're okay with people, as long as they're all right with people, because I do believe people give to people. And I think, you know, if you're all right with people and you get along with people and all that, and then if you go with good ideas, or ideas that will then you can excite people about them, then they will generally respond in the right way if they've got the means to do so, really. Yeah. I think also not trying to aim too high with things, really. I think sometimes, and I think we've all been guilty of this, and I've certainly been. I mean, I'll give an example of that. I think one of the best lessons I ever learned was working with the farm. When we were trying to get produce records off the ground, when we were trying to get funding to get that label going. And there used to be a young lad who worked with us called Barney. Lovely, wearing an old battered barber jacket. Used to smoke weed like everyone did, and so on, and was just there for the band, really. He was I guess a roadie, for want of a better thing, really, but he was just always there. He was a fan of the band, but would help out any way that he could. And the Mondays got signed to Factory and all this, and we couldn't get anyone to sign the farm. And Barney used to say things like, I've got a few quid, I'll put the money into to put a record out if you want. We used to go, yeah, Barney, carry that amp, and we leave us to work this out, And so we'd go, and then that went on for some time, and then after several months, we said, there was no options. It was like the old Beatles story, but the farm, every door had been closed. So why don't we just speak to Barney? He keeps offering, let's put a record out with him. We said okay. So we said, okay, Barney, do you want to source it? He goes, okay, come and meet me dad's accountants. So we thought, flipping heck, we didn't even know anyone who had an accountant at that time. And so me and Peter Hooton drove to meet his dad's accountants down by the waterfront in Liverpool. And I always remember driving into, I always tried to work out where this building was, but it must have been round by the Three Graces somewhere. But I always remember we had to go through past a kind of, a barrier, as it was. And this is like 1989, 1990, whatever year it was. And literally I had my battered up, because I didn't even have the thingy then. By then I didn't have It was before I got that, because I hadn't been signed before the Cavalier. I think a Triumph Toledo or whatever it was, So I'm driving up, and Peter didn't even have a car, and Barney's on the back seat. And I drove up, and this guy just went, where the fuck do you think you're going in that? Stop me. And Barney just popped his head round the thing, and this guy almost saluted him.
Wow.
And he goes, oh, sorry about that, lifted the barrier up, and I went, fucking hell. We walked to this kind of what was a whole floor of accountants. And everyone almost again stood to attention as he walked in. And we went into the boardroom, and the guy goes, hello, Barnaby. Never heard him called Barnaby before. Right. Hello, Barnaby, how's your father? And all this, and all this. And me and Peter sat there. And by the way, I'd gone in literally on the back of a stamp, working out how much it would cost us to, and I was thinking we'd even pushed it because I thought, let's try and get an album out of it, Yeah. And I think I'd put down about £12,000, whatever it was, and that was us doing it, on a shoestring, whatever it was, being able to get it all done. And I always remember us sitting down, and they threw them manila envelopes, onto the table, and it just said Moores Foundation on the thing, and I just kind of kicked Peter under the table and said, don't talk about money, don't mention money. And the guy went, let's cut to the chase then. Your father tells me you're setting up a record label or something. Tell me all about it. I said, oh, well, I'm Dave. I'm going to be, I manage the band at the moment. I'm going to be running it. We've got a guy called Kev Sampson and Suggs who wants to come in and manage them if we can get the label going. How much do you need? And I went, don't really know, and all this, because in my head it was this 12k. And he goes, well, let's cut to the chase. He goes, your father's instructed me to start the bank account with £95,000. Will that be enough to get it going? And I went, that'll be absolutely fine.
How the fuck did you?
And we came out and we kicked, and I went, Barney, fucking hell. We'd been going on for months. Why did you never tell me who your dad was? And he goes, you've never asked. And we never asked. We just assumed he wasn't that important in the chain and all that. And I think the lesson from it, I learned from that is, and whenever I've done any teaching, the most important person who could change your life could be the person who sat right next to you, really. So don't assume it's the Seymour Steins of this world that you can't get near or whatever. Fuck them. Yeah. Think about, James Barney sets up Cream, him and Darren, they cancelled out each other's weaknesses. They were on his own. He wouldn't have done it. So work with people who cancel out your weaknesses. So I would say that, really, if you're no good at the business side of it, find someone who is good at it. And work with them, really. Because, like I said, going back to it, I'm rubbish at loads of things, but I just surround myself with other people who are good at those things. Really,
Well, you're obviously good at not only picking the people, but to sort of assemble teams of people.
You still get it wrong as well, every now and again, but more I get it right more than I get it wrong, really,
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the record label side of it, now that you're back into that, there must be enormous changes since the last time you were involved.
Oh God, huge. I mean, records ain't what they used to be, so it's the for example, we had a top 20 album a couple of months ago. We did about we did 5,000 sales in 1 week to get that, to be in, straight in at 18 and straight out again the week after.
Wow.
To have gone in top 20, when I'm talking about the days that I was talking about, would have been a couple of 100,000 albums at that time,
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to, depending on the time of year, at least 100,000. So, that's a massive change in it in terms of the income streams that you get from it. Having said that, there's lots more opportunities. The barriers to entry are so much easier for people to get involved in now. Sync opportunities to sync your music with film, TV, games.
Yeah.
More than ever, those opportunities are, so much more than when I was doing it 20 odd years ago, or 30 years ago, however long ago it is now. God, I forget how many years have gone by. Yeah. So things have changed, but the mechanics of it are still exactly the same. You still need great bands.
Yeah.
You still need people who can connect with audiences, and you still need great songs.
Yeah.
So that bit's not really changed, really.
No.
The only other bit, I guess, is artists are so accessible now by their own fan base because of social media, really.
Yeah.
So you can't really separate them out from that side of it.
Yeah. Dave, I could talk all night, but I know you're on a timeline. So thanks for popping in. Enjoy your Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going with me dad to watch
Yeah.
Laurel and Hardy tonight, Sons of the Desert.
Come in and talk about Laurel and Hardy.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Or
Yeah.
Arthur Lowe.
Yes, Arthur Lowe, Big Dad's Army fan.
Yeah.
Thank you for borrowing me his
You'll enjoy
biography.
it.
Yeah, thank you
You'll
very
enjoy
much.
it. Graham
Yeah.
Lord's a great writer.
Yeah, brilliant.
Well, cheers, Dave. Have a good evening, and I'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Livo. Lovely to see you.
Nice one. Cheers, man.
Bye-bye.